Okay, here we are. Welcome to the Soul's Kitchen podcast. I almost forgot the name of my own podcast there. Um, I'm Lisa Wilby, and I'm here with Sean Richards, who is a audio engineer, uh, tour manager, and record producer, and all things music. Hi, Sean.
Hi, how are you? How are
Good. How
you?
are you? Welcome. Thanks for
Good.
being on the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so on the Soul's Kitchen, I talk to people who are living their soul's purpose or desire. So, I mean, actually, you know what? This is episode 27, and I was
27.
27 when I moved to Toronto.
Very interesting.
Isn't that
Very,
interesting?
very.
I just thought of that. And that's probably when I won't say how many years ago that was, but it was a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you were a musician at the time. I mean, you still are a musician.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we played in a reggae band together.
We did. We did.
We
Some
did, and
years.
some years,
Yeah.
and so how did you go? Well, how did you get into music, and then how did you go from playing music to doing sound? Because you've done some sound for quite a few big bands.
Over the years, I have. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I started out like I'll try and keep this as brief as possible, but I started out as a
Okay.
teenager.
Yeah.
First of all, playing. Started playing guitar and then playing with other people, obviously. But very early on, I found an interest in recording myself, and
Oh.
I bought a guitar first, and maybe a couple of guitar pedals, and then the next thing I think I bought was a 4-track recording machine,
Okay.
and then I bought a drum machine, and then and so I all through my teenage years, I saw myself as kind of a record engineer, recording engineer,
Right.
musician, and I was for the at least for the first few years, I was very much a self-taught musician. I didn't have formal training or anything,
Hmm.
and so I picked up some formal training a little bit later on, but the idea of making music as much as playing music, making and recording music was
Okay.
always right from the very beginning. In the first couple of years, I started doing that. Um, and I had a bit of a moment where I had to decide, do I do this or do I do that? And for some years, just around the time that I met you, I had decided I was going to focus on being a musician much more than a
Okay.
engineer. And that a couple of things came along. I actually applied to university as a musician for a music degree,
Right.
and the very same year I applied to recording school, Fanshawe College, which was at the time kind of the only place you could apply to be a recording engineer. And I guess I was making strange music. I was not making pop music. I was making
Okay.
avant-garde, I don't know, wacky. I was in the bedroom. I listened
Right.
to funny, I guess I listened to progressive and jazz and things like that. And I think what Fanshawe College wanted at the time was a very right down the middle pop
Oh.
background. And so I had to submit a demo tape, and
Okay.
the demo tape was, I would love to say I have it still, but I don't have it still.
You
But
don't
I,
have
I
it.
would love to listen to it, because I'd probably get a good laugh as to what
Right.
I
What
thought
was
might pass the
might get you
audition,
into college?
because
Yeah.
I know
Oh
for a
my
fact it
goodness.
was pretty strange and outside of pop conventions or whatnot. And so, funnily enough, and it really shaped my next bunch of years, I got rejected from recording school and got accepted into music school.
How many people get to say that they got rejected from recording school?
Well, yeah,
I
right.
think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. So I kept being involved in recording, and I was interested in it, but it really, and long long story short, it ended up being a real blessing for me, because it allowed me to spend some years really honing a musical identity and a craft,
Yeah.
and deciding how much of a musician I was or wanted to be. Um, and I ended up getting involved in live audio, like mixing bands,
Mm-hmm.
live on
Yes.
stage, near the end of my university years doing the music program.
So where
And it
did you
was,
do the music program? Sorry to interrupt you there.
yeah, I ended up going to York University.
You work. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, which
Cool.
was a pretty liberal program. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
someone coming from somewhat self-taught, I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
classically, I
Mm.
certainly didn't have 10 years of classical training or any of
Right.
that, and they had a good, they have a good jazz program, they have a good classical program, but someone like me could get in there, and
Oh,
they'd give me a
wow.
couple of years to get my feet and figure out my,
Yeah.
what I was doing with it. And so that was a real fortunate thing for me,
That's great.
um,
Yeah.
and ultimately I got into the uh, what do they call it, the electroacoustic composition side of things,
Oh.
which is, again, avant-garde, outside, sort of compositional, music. But
Yeah.
more than anything, it got me back into the recording studio,
Right.
and
Okay.
it was making electronic ish sounds and composing music using the electronics it was kind of an extension of what I've been doing when I was a teenager. And suddenly I was in a university program doing this, and I was like, wow, people actually do this. This is amazing. And so that's how I finished my music program, was actually using the recording studio as an instrument, if that makes
Wow.
sense.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. And
And
so
yeah, go ahead.
no, and so in a way it was kind of full circle, but it also uh it I wouldn't call it a technical program from the recording
Right.
engineering side of it. It was about how to conceive of sound and
Mm.
music, and and I've always felt that it was at least a very interesting way to eventually wind up in the recording engineering side of things, because I've always used my ears
Right.
with that information,
That.
thinking about
So,
music and sound in this
yes.
compositional sort of way that maybe I wouldn't have gotten if I'd gone to Fanshawe. So,
This is so true. Now you
right.
can see, looking back, you went the right path for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. And then literally as a part-time job, I got hired, a random one of my bands. I had this band, a couple of bands I played at, indie rock. I don't know what to call it.
Hmm.
When I was doing uh, my last couple of years of university, and I played a club and met the sound guy, and I was like, oh, I think I could do that. Give me a call one day. And he
Right.
called me the next month, and suddenly I had a part-time job doing sound in the local clubs in Toronto. And
So cool.
when I finished school, I was like, I am not going to become a waiter or a
Mm.
bartender or get a part-time job. I'm going to do this somehow, come hell or high water.
That that is cool.
Yeah. And so it was hard. Absolutely. The first couple of years were quite literally starving artist level,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
work, but I stuck with it. And eventually I got more and more offers and phone calls and on people's lists of,
People to
hey, can you,
call. Yeah.
mix here, mix there. And long story short, that was some decades ago now, but I built on it, and I got more experience doing live sound and applying my engineering skills, learning on the job somewhat,
Right.
um, and possibly, or I would argue anyway, that my somewhat unique approach to merging musicality and composition and engineering
Hmm.
kind of made it so that my skills, though I needed more technical support in the early days, I could really relate to musicians. I could
Yes.
I could I could
Yeah.
I could relate to the music. It was always the music first, the musicians first. Um, and the sounds that I think I was putting together were not purely technical. And I think people heard that and hired me
Mm.
for that.
Because of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I knew you were always kind of the sound guy in the band. When we did gigs and then we did some recordings and you were always like kind of orchestrating everything, but I didn't really get what everything that you just said, but I get it. I can see it now.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah,
Yeah,
that's my early. I try
I
to keep
love
that
it.
story a bit short, but
No, it's a great story. I love
yeah.
that.
Mhm.
Those are exactly the stories I want to hear. So you stuck with it. You've got all of these talents. And then, when did you start? We can come back to the music after, but when did you start going like on the road? So you've been all over the world.
Yeah, I guess I bounced around the Toronto club scene for a
Hmm.
number of years, and I thought, I mean, again, this was at a time when I wasn't making very much money, just barely making my rent, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Um, but I did want to see the world, and I met someone who managed a band literally on the sidewalk walking down Queen Street one day who knew me, and they were looking for someone to take their band down to the US and back, kind of thing. And I, of course, threw out all the names of people that we both knew in common, and they were like, "Oh, that person's not available," And long story short, I finally ran out of names. I said, "Well, what about me?" And she just went, "Oh, would you do it?" I was like, "Sure.
Mm,
Yeah, why not?" And I just threw myself right in there, and I just
mm.
I just said, "Yes, I can do it." And they asked me if I could drive. I was like, "Yeah, I can drive." And I said, "Well, if you don't mind, do you mind, hanging on to the cash and dealing with the receipts?" And I'm like, "Sure, that sounds easy." I mean, I just said yes because I
you,
wanted the work,
you
but
wanted to go, yeah.
but of course, none of it sounded difficult to me. And you know, little did I know that that was sort of a whole career path at the time.
Okay.
But by agreeing to that, I suddenly found myself out there on the road. And I think when I was playing with the
Hmm.
band, my biggest challenge at the time was that I loved touring. I loved being with other bands.
Mm,
It was a bit of a conflict, obviously, with trying to maintain and organize and run a fairly
hmm.
large size. The band we had was somewhere between 6 and 10 people most of the time.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and so it was hard to keep that going if I was going away for 4 weeks at a time,
Right.
and
Yeah.
there's a bit of that in the early days, especially. You just kind of say yes to everything, and so
Hmm.
suddenly I would be out there like 8-9 months at a time, almost
Right.
never home, and it became quite challenging. And I had some conflict, and some internal conflict about, I love this, but it's taking away from the music. What's my,
Hard to have a life. I mean, friends and all of that if you're on the road too, I would imagine.
yeah, I guess it is. And in some ways, I had to pick friends that were okay with me disappearing,
Well, yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And there were people that I met in my life that had similar lifestyles, and we just kind of made it work as friends.
Yeah.
But yeah, social life, home life, some of the traditional things that people do in their late 20s to early 30s, like
Mm,
settling down, and
hmm.
it's definitely more challenged. All of that is more challenged. And I didn't see myself as a traditionalist in any way,
Right.
but I certainly have had some push and pull with myself about whether I'm losing on something by gaining this other thing.
Right. Well, I
I
get
certainly.
there's the question. I think a lot of people could ask themselves that question. What with whatever choices we make.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Though
Yeah.
I will say that I felt I stagnated. I started to feel stagnant in the local scene.
Okay.
I felt like I could do bigger and better things,
Mhm.
um, larger venues, bigger bands, so on
Mhm.
and so forth. And if I had to pick staying in Toronto and just doing the clubs, or
Right.
having no social life and getting on the road and starting to work in bigger venues and seeing the world and working with bigger artists, I certainly would take the latter over the former.
Yeah, because you kind of did the former too. You were in that
Yeah.
Toronto scene.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Do you mind telling some of the bands you worked with?
Well, over the years, I worked with a singer. I mean, one of the they're not that international, but we got around the world quite a bit. One of the artists that really gave me a big push to get out there and really start to see Europe, and we went to Japan a bunch of times,
Wow.
was a singer-songwriter named Ron Sexsmith.
Right. Yes, I
And
remember that. Yes.
yeah, and so he was an artist that I worked with that we had an on and off working relationship for almost 10 years,
Wow.
we went to all kinds of places, and they trusted me with going to places that they were at that time hiring locals to take care of them. And I kind of ended up doing it all. And that was a really great gate opener for me, because once you say you've gone to Europe or UK, people will hire you to go there. But getting out that door the first time, getting that door open the first time is always like, well, maybe we use someone who's already done this before,
Yeah.
But then over the years, I mean, my list is pages long, but I ended up working with a band called Metric for some time.
From Montreal.
Montreal.
Yeah.
They have
Are they
Montreal
not?
roots.
They do? Okay.
Toronto, Montreal. They're kind of a bit international. I work with an American artist named John Legend.
You did?
I did, yeah.
I didn't know that. Wow. How was that?
That was awesome. It was very stressful,
Okay. That's a big name.
but it was great. And at that point in my career, I had also realized that there were other jobs in this industry, and that when I originally had said to this first person that gave me a job, and they said, "Hey, can you take care of the money? Can you drive the vehicle?" That opened up a whole can of worms. It also opened up a whole career path as a tour manager.
Tour manager, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And so I just realized at some point that I didn't like to stay idle, and I had a very active brain, and I could multitask. And so if I was on the road, I didn't mind doing a whole bunch of other jobs that some people didn't have any interest in. And I slowly realized I could develop those skills, and I would get better work for it. And so I started to go, well, I'll lean into this a bit, even though I don't, I still see myself as a musician, sound engineer at heart. I realized if I can do it and I'm competent at this stuff, might as well get good at it and not resist it.
That's very interesting. So how did you develop the skills as a tour manager? That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. I think that, I've had some young people ask me that question, walk up, how did you get into this job? How do you do this? And it sounds flippant, but my answer is always, well, you just go on the road and you manage things.
No, well, it's true. It's sort of what you did, but like you have really like sunk into a lot of different parts of the music world, which is really interesting.
I think that there are people that have a natural capacity to look at this as a problem-solving challenge and get in there and start to address it that way, and to be a planner, to organize things. And I think I got this from my mom, but I do have a bit of this sort of a sheepdog, corral the the people around, kind of,
get it going.
Border collie. I have a border collie sort of characteristic in my personality that's kind of in my genes or something. And I know my mom was kind of like that. She was a bit of a
interesting.
She became the I don't know what position she had, but she worked at the local
Okay.
the local tennis club, and then became the party organizer for the summer
Right.
event or whatever. She was just really good at
Okay.
that stuff. And so that suited me or fit my personality. And so I do think there are people that would be less inclined or less strong in that role, because they're just, it doesn't come naturally to them. And I guess it came naturally to me. And so I just started learning all of these things, and accounting was an interesting challenge. And,
Especially in the music business, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I guess accounting is accounting, but
yeah. And as long as for me, it was somehow serving the art and the artists, I found that the more mundane things were a positive challenge for me. I saw them as, oh, I'll learn this because it's interesting. I wouldn't find myself jazzed by that if I was just working at a desk job,
right,
at a bank.
No,
but
I know exactly
because it was serving something,
yeah.
I definitely saw that.
So did you? So you were tour manager like after, or do you go back into being like a sound engineer / tour manager, or have you been doing one or the other more?
The biggest challenge in Canada, particularly, but Canada and the US, is that the labor and cost of touring means that a lot of people have to double up jobs. And so a very traditional, and I don't know if it's a personality, back to the genetics thing, I don't know if it's a personality thing, but a very, very common job pairing is tour manager, sound engineer.
Okay. I did not know that. Yeah.
And so at some point the jobs get bigger and bigger, and the artists get bigger and bigger, and the two jobs are quite literally in conflict with each other in terms of what you're doing during the day and when you need to be doing certain things, unless the artist is very particularly able to kind of care for themselves when the tour manager is out mixing the band, or setting up to mix the band, sound checks and all that. And there are certainly artists that are in that position. It does become increasingly harder to do these two jobs at once.
Okay.
Obviously. So the reason why this came up was because when I started working with John Legend, I was not his sound engineer. I was hired to help with the touring side of it. And for the first 9 months or so, I was just I wasn't his tour manager. I was his production manager, which is related, but more, let's call it more technical. So, because there was 30 of us on the tour, I took care of the crew. I took care of the sound engineer, the background technicians, that kind of thing. And the tour manager kind of oversaw the whole big piece, but also took care of the artist and the band.
Gotcha.
So I was working for him as a production manager, and I was really leaning into the idea that I get to do this exclusively, and I get to hire really excellent sound engineers that I respect. It was an excellent moment for me, because as much as I love mixing bands, and love being the engineer, there's also something really nice about saying, this is my one job, I'm going to lean into it. And so I really embraced that for some time.
That's cool. So how did you get that job? Like, you weren't standing on the street with a guy and going through all the names and then said, why not me? That wasn't the way you got the John Legend job.
No, it wasn't quite like that, but it was an extension of that.
Okay. Because you were
way of doing things, because
I
had literally worked with someone who had been brought in to take over as John's kind of day-to-day tour manager. And they remembered me from a couple of shows we'd done together.
Cool. Yeah.
And they thought highly of me and said, hey, I'm in a bit of a bind here. I need to get rid of somebody. They're not working out. And so it was quite literally sort of a version of what I referred to earlier.
Yeah.
It was,
Okay.
this industry is full of referrals. There's
Yes,
very
I can
few
see
people
that.
that send in their resume and hire based
Pick the
on
best one based on their availability.
their CV.
Yeah.
Sometimes it happens,
Yeah.
but I have
Mhm.
to say, for better or for worse, it's very, very much still to this day a referral business,
Right.
because everyone wants to trust that you heard
You-
from someone else that you're good at what you do and that you'll be a good fit.
Yeah.
Because as you can imagine, a bad fit can be.
Oh, I can. But that's the one thing I was going to say, because I always remember, and even how you are here, like your disposition has always been so calm and so just level. I don't think I've ever seen you get upset. You were able to handle so many things with the way you are right now, which is kind of
Oh, well,
probably a skill or a definitely an asset, I would say. If you're doing all of those things, which sound complicated, even if you know what you're doing.
I mean, I have my moments. I'm sure there are people
Sure.
who would
Yeah.
say, "Oh, I remember Sean when," or whatnot.
Yeah.
But certainly that is. I certainly present externally that way, and for the
Hmm.
most part, I can live that internally as well.
Hmm.
I I'm sure there are times when everybody has sort of inner panic going on. This is not
Hmm.
going the way I want it to. Might fall apart. If I just wait a minute, will it be okay? Kind of thing.
Right.
But how you present to the outside world as a
Hmm.
calming force,
Hmm.
um, being the one in the room that sort of says, let's just wait this out, it'll
Hmm.
all work out, or I've got a plan,
Right.
let's
You
think
need one
this
of
through.
those. You need one
You
of
need
those people.
those. And I guess I do have a fair bit of that. And it
Mm.
does seem, for the most part, that when things get really, like when people start ramping up their anxiety, I tend to go the opposite
Mm.
direction. So I guess again, it's another case of it being a good fit for me, because that kind of point of view and that kind
Hmm.
of presentation to people in the room is just fairly natural for me. So
Wow.
I've been able to be in pretty highly charged environments when I'm the one that's calming people down, and that's,
Hmm.
I guess, what you want out of a tour manager or production manager.
Yeah, it definitely.
You know,
So where are you headed to next?
we so obviously the last few years, the uh, the pandemic changed
Mm.
a lot of things for a lot of people. I took some time off from travel and touring, like many, folks
Hmm.
did. I
Hmm.
got very fortunate that I got a so-called desk job,
Hmm.
and it was a really stressful but good job for me. It was still in the industry, um, but over the last couple of years, I've stepped my foot back into
Mm.
traveling again.
Hmm.
I've been working with this artist named Dragonette for some years, and we're,
Okay.
I guess, good friends at this point now. And so whenever they're traveling, I will work
You
with them.
go.
And then most of the last couple of years has been with this jazz fusion band called Sungazer, and
Okay.
it kind of came again a bit from left field. Sort of, I got a
Mm.
bit of a random phone call about it, but it's been a really, really great experience, because um, they make great music.
Hmm.
They care. They work hard. And I think at this point in my career, my interest is not in how big the tour is.
Right.
It's how
You.
good the people are,
Oh,
and how aligned I am with their basic view on what
that's
touring is for them.
yeah.
Um,
I love that.
yeah, it's important. I
Wow.
think it's important. It doesn't matter what industry or work you're in. I think if you're
You're right.
aligned with good people, or people that you connect with,
Hmm.
and as you can imagine, um, the potential, anyway, I won't say this it's always the case, but there's always the potential in the music industry of people expecting other people to do a lot of the work for
Right.
you,
Yes.
and a lot of enabling, if you will, of that
Mm-hmm.
point of view,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and for me, the most satisfying work I've done, doesn't matter which artist it is, has been with the people that are doing the work themselves,
Right.
respect you for the work you're bringing to the organization,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody's working just as hard as each other,
Right.
in
It
in
takes
their
up.
own way, right? Like, I don't expect a singer in a band to be necessarily doing certain things, but at the
Yeah.
same time, they need to be
They're doing their work.
doing the
Yeah.
job and treating people correctly with the right
Mm-hmm.
spirit, and
Oh,
you
I
know
really love that that's what you're doing. Like, I mean, with aligning with people and your values. I mean, that is really important.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
I suffered a little bit when I was in my 30s, taking any gig that was available to me, and I certainly found myself, I learned kind of the hard way that
Mm-hmm.
you can take all the work you want, but if you don't like the people
Mm.
or the work,
Mm-hmm.
you're in a bit of a hot box. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
that's the right term. You're the
Okay.
right
Yeah.
term, but you
Sure.
can be in a pretty amplified environment if you're not enjoying the people you're
Mm.
with,
Mm-hmm.
because you're either in a tour bus or in a van or doing these high pressure
Yeah.
type and
Wow.
schedules, and you gotta like them. You
Mm-hmm.
really do. It's
Yeah.
important. Like I said, working at any job is gonna have elements to that, but there is something, I have to say, there is something very unique about concert touring where you know
Mm-hmm.
you're on stage at 8 p.m. You
Mm-hmm.
have to make that happen,
You have to make that happen. Wow.
um, and
No pressure.
no pressure, right?
Yeah.
And so that brings forward a degree of effort that everybody needs to make as a team, so
Right.
yeah.
That's amazing. I love
But
hearing your story.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Go ahead. Sorry. You were going to
No,
say something.
so anyway, the point is simply that Sungazer is a great artist that I work
Okay.
with, and that they've been wonderful to sort of almost shepherd into a bigger career, because they started playing small venues and we're slowly
Mm.
playing bigger and bigger venues. I bring, I'm literally twice their age, I guess,
Right.
pretty close to that.
Mm-hmm.
And but I like the idea. It's not mentoring; it's just tour managing. But it's also
Yeah. You
showing
bring.
people, having some experience that and they're open to it. They hear that there are points of view that
Mm-hmm.
they haven't thought of before, and I just like that. So
Yeah. A growth mindset.
yeah.
Yeah. Love that.
Hmm.
Um, there's a few questions I ask everybody that comes on. I didn't tell you what they were before. I do apologize. Sometimes I give
Okay.
but they're not hard. They're not like,
We're
they're
not
just kind of
tests.
no. Um, but what is a belief that you've once had that has changed over time?
In terms of my career, or just as a
Just in life, I guess, in general in life. And we can come back to that one if you can't think of something. This is like an interview question for her job.
um
I'm just kidding.
no, this is a well uh it's interesting. We've talked an awful lot about the synergy of my
Mm,
personality and my
mhm,
you know and this career. I, I will say that um I've really shifted my idea about how much I thought I had my act together, and
mm,
what motivates me just in life, but also in career. I feel like now versus before, I'm more in control of my choices,
mm.
and I
I
also
love
think
that.
that I also
Yeah,
think that I'm more understanding of what pitfalls I might bring to the table.
mhm,
Um, and so that's really been the biggest shift for me over the years. I ended up kind of having a bit of a personal crisis maybe 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I wound up in, it wasn't too serious, but it was just a reckoning, personal
Mm-hmm.
reckoning. Wound up in therapy, talking to a therapist, and ever since, I just feel so much that I have a better understanding, and I'm a little closer to grasping what kind of motivates me, but also what triggers me,
Okay.
and so that's been the biggest shift for me, and the biggest change.
Wow. Amazing. Okay. What is something that you've done that you would think would make your younger self proud?
Well, I think the thing that I'm most happy with right now is that starting early or late 2023,
Mm-hmm.
I had been dabbling in making music again, making my own music.
Mm-hmm.
I had taken a break from it for some time, and I was doing it a little bit as a stress reliever. Just, oh well, this
Mm-hmm.
is some people go
Mm-hmm.
play squash. I'll play with my
Music.
computer,
Yeah.
music and whatnot. I ended up producing a record for my stepkid over the
Oh.
pandemic,
Yeah.
and it took us about a year to make this thing, and I really, really dug into. I have a little tiny studio set up, but I
Right.
really dug into the process and learning how to just bring all of the skills that I've picked up over the years
Oh.
and and touch back into what I was doing when I was a teenager and even in my early 20s. And
Amazing.
so that led to me dabbling in my own creation
Mm-hmm.
and getting back into and doing some remixes for some people. And long story short, I made the sort of very focused decision early 24 that what I really, really wanted to do was divide my time somewhat equally between being out there, traveling,
Mm-hmm.
touring, whatnot, and making music for myself or
Right.
producing records for other
Other
people.
people.
Um,
Right.
and one of the biggest challenges that I know I suffered from when I was younger was being being willing to push aside an obligation like a record that I'm working on or some music that I'm making in order to go and travel and
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
tour and so on and so forth. And I realized, no, you need to not let you need to create boundaries for yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
you need to say, this is my time, this is your time.
Mm-hmm.
This is
Mm-hmm.
stuff that you only learn when you're maybe over 50 or something. I don't know.
Yeah, for
Maybe
sure.
some people learn
They
it when they're
get
20,
they
but I
get better
certainly,
at it
yeah,
anyway.
I
Yeah.
definitely gotten better at it. So I made the very, very focused decision to sort of, I guess the term would be, manifest
Mm.
this life where I'm trying to be 50-50 and to actually make
Right.
some good music if I can. And just between the beginning of 2024 and today, I've put out 3 albums that I've produced.
Wow.
Um, and I'm able to say that I've found, or I am sitting comfortably where I'm living this sort of 50-50 lifestyle. I'd like to make more money staying at home making records,
Right. Well,
but at the same time, it's not about the money. It's about me and
you're
about what
having.
I feel that I can do. And I can honestly say that after all this time, if I can look at my younger self and go, wow, okay, you did all this 30
Yeah.
years down the line, and you're back doing this thing that you kind of imagined doing when I was 20.
Right.
But I'm also not uh, sort of, what I'm doing is doing it in a way that feels well regimented
And
and
aligned with you, aligned with
aligned and
your,
balanced, and
yeah,
one isn't sort of infecting the other or
right.
diminishing the other.
Mm,
I feel like I can live each portion of my path now with a bit more clarity and
mm.
directness, and that feels very, very good. I don't think I had that when I was younger, and I'm glad I can say I'm achieving
You
some
have
version
it.
of it now. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, the podcast is called The Soul's Kitchen. So one of the questions I ask is, what would you say is your ingredient for life? So it's not, it can be food or it can just be something else. And I
That's
know you cook too. So
I like to
I
cook.
know you're a
Yes.
good cook.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got into cooking late. I was very late
Yeah.
at cooking, but I will
Yeah.
say that cooking. It's funny. It's
Cooking and music kind of
we've prepared a whole meal where I'm going to jump off this and I'm going to
and go
jump
eat
into the
it.
kitchen and make a bunch
Oh,
of food, right?
oh.
And yes, cooking is a very soul fulfilling
Mm-hmm.
experience for me now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm blown away how fulfilling it is for me and how rewarding it is to do, considering how little I did it when I was younger. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think I had a family
Right.
history that encouraged cooking the way
Mm.
some families do, right? I think your family
Yeah.
comes from a little more,
Yeah.
no, let's all get together
Well,
and
we did that last night. Yeah. Cook.
cook,
But
cook, cook,
yeah,
cook. But it's a family love experience that
right.
that
Yeah.
I didn't have when I was younger.
Okay. But you're creating
I
it now.
So I had to learn it myself, but I did pick it up, and
So is cooking your ingredient for life? Is that
it's definitely one of them.
one of them?
Definitely
Okay.
one of them. At least, or again, carving out the time for yourself
Mm.
to
To
do the
do this.
cooking and to
Right.
just love it for its own sake, um,
Mm. Yeah.
and being able to do it for someone else or for a family of people, a group of
Mm-hmm.
people, that those types of things for me are very, very rewarding and
Yeah.
a definite ingredient for life, for sure.
Okay. I love
For
it.
sure. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you another question that I haven't asked anybody else,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
it seems fitting because I don't know. Do you eat with a fork or a spoon?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I one of the cuisines that I really dug into was Thai food.
Thai, yeah, and they eat with a fork and spoon,
They eat with a
right?
fork and spoon and
Yeah,
not a knife or not
I
chopsticks.
love that. Yes.
And I kind of lean into that. I
Yeah.
I agree with that, frankly.
Okay. I
Obviously,
like it.
if you got to cut a steak, you got to use a
You
knife. But
Yeah, I've always been a spoon eater and I've always found it interesting. I don't know, at some point I thought, why do I like eating with a spoon? I don't know. I just do. If I can even a salad, I'll eat it with a spoon. If
that's
I can.
interesting.
If I
That's
can. I
interesting.
just love a bowl and a spoon. But anyway.
That what I find myself eating things with a fork, and then I get halfway through it, and I say,
And you
"What
just
am I
spoon.
doing? Let's just get a spoon."
So you're a
This is
half and a halfer.
well, I guess the fork is a traditional thing. You just grab a fork and you eat most things with
Yeah,
a
it's
fork.
true. You without thinking about it.
Because you stab it. I don't know what
Yeah.
the deal is, but so I go for the default
Mm-hmm.
to start, but at some point I realize the fallacy in that, and I
Mm-hmm.
go, wait a second,
Mm.
spoon, let's do it.
Spoon. Oh, I
So
love it. Sean, where can we find your music that you produce? You're on SoundCloud, right?
I'm on SoundCloud. Yeah.
Okay.
My moniker is Protourman. Um, Funnily enough, I got that when I was very, very early in touring
Mm.
as a AOL online user, which was back
Okay.
in the
Yes.
days. This really
Mm-hmm.
ages me, but back when you used to have to stick the CD into the
Yeah.
computer and
Mhm.
sign on to your local phone number and all that stuff. But one of my earliest, like, I tried Tour Manager and tour
Right.
manage, all kinds of
Yes.
variations.
No, that's a good name, Protourman.
Yeah, and so Protourman became the one that, this one's available without having to, 5, 6, 7, 3, 2,
Right.
1 at the
Yes.
end of it,
Yeah.
And so I took it, and over the years it's just kind of become, that's kind of me, yeah. And so that's what I use on my SoundCloud page, is Protourman,
Okay.
and my Instagram is the same.
Okay.
But yeah, and there's some stuff on Spotify. I did a couple of remixes for folks. I ended up producing, or I guess co-producing, with this band, The Human Rights, this reggae record recently.
Yeah.
And I had done a remix for them, I guess 3 years ago.
That's on Spotify?
That's on Spotify under my name.
Cool.
Yeah. But their record's out, and I guess I'm listed as a producer on that more than as an artist. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, Sean, it's been an amazing time talking to you.
Likewise. Always great to chat with you. Yeah.
I've learned so much about you, and I love, the path that your life has taken. So thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you for having me. And yeah, I love that this is the 27th podcast, and that
And I was 27 when I moved to Toronto, and I met you shortly after that.
There you go.
From answering an ad, and I think it was Now Magazine. Somebody was looking for a reggae keyboard player. I'm like, oh,
there you go. There you go. Are you still playing at all?
Just in my living room right now.
Okay.
But yeah.
Cool.
Anyway,
Right
Sean,
on.
thank you so much. Stick around. I'm just going to end this, but we'll have a quick chat after we're done, and then I'll let you go cook your beautiful meal. Thank you again, Sean.
Thank you. Thank you.